politics of our life and times from an unabashedly Christian point of view on the Bob Dutko News Hour.
Cue the theme. Mic up. Level on 1. Cue announcer in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Bob Dutko News Hour begins right now.
Welcome, everybody. Good Thursday to you. You're listening to the Bob Dutko Show. This is the News Hour, news and politics from a Christian perspective, the first of our 4 hours together each day. Very happy to be with all of you here on WMUZ in Detroit, as well as our affiliates around the country. In this News Hour, well, Republicans, some of them at least, are now hammering back at President Obama, who hammered Republicans for Republicans hammering President Obama for not using the term radical Islam. What is the latest on this? But also the troubling nature of President Obama's unwillingness to ever acknowledge anything negative about Islam. What is that about? You'll see what I mean. And we're going to compare that to the president's consistent willingness to see the worst in Christianity. Why is that? Well, we'll talk about that. Also, a really troubling trend of more and more people in the media, as well as in the Obama administration, somehow equating the problems of Islamic terrorism to conservative evangelical Christianity in this country. The New York Times, the Huffington Post, actually going so far as to blame the Orlando terrorist attacks, not on Islam, not on ISIS, on Republicans and conservative Christians. You're kidding me. Well, shouldn't be surprised when this terror attack happened. I predicted, I said, quote, I would not be a bit surprised if we didn't see some in the media and some liberals try to blame this attack on conservative Christians and on Republicans. Well, there we are. Stephen Colbert, who took over for David Letterman, using a swastika as part of a joke to describe and define Donald Trump's positions. It's getting a lot of media attention, what he said, and so many people think, oh, that's just so funny. Oh, that's just so witty. I'm thinking that's grossly inappropriate, but we'll discuss that. Also, you all know Chaplain Gordon James Klingenschmitt. He was the United States Navy chaplain who was court-martialed for ending his prayer in Jesus' name. Remember that? Well, anyway, Chaplain Klingenschmitt will be with me this hour. And so we got a lot of things on tap to talk about. First, though, Republicans, some of them at least, are counterpunching President Obama's counterpunching of the criticisms on him for not using the term radical Islam. All right? As Fox News reports, quote, Republicans roundly rejected President Obama's rationale for refusing to use the term radical Islam in describing terror attacks. Responding that, quote, you don't have to define the enemy, or the Republicans now are saying, quote, you have to define the enemy to defeat it. Now, you folks recall, the president the other day after the Orlando attacks, he gave a speech, and in this speech, he attacked Donald Trump and other Republicans who have criticized the president for refusing to use the term radical Islam. And the president was saying, quote, calling a threat by a different name does not make it go away. There's no magic to the phrase radical Islam. It's a political talking point and whatever. And the issue that the president doesn't get here is that Americans are looking at him and saying, wait a minute, if you don't identify what the actual problem is, if you don't recognize that this is in fact a religious issue, that these extremists that are carrying out these terrorist attacks, they consider themselves to be Muslim. They are doing this in the name of Allah. They're saying Allahu Akbar. They're getting this from the Quran. The president doesn't seem to be willing to acknowledge this. Now, does that mean that I'm saying that all 1.6 billion Muslims in the world are terrorist-minded? No, of course not. No one is suggesting any such thing. And that becomes kind of the talking point from the left. We can't call it radical Islam because if you call it radical Islam, then that's the same thing as saying all Muslims support terrorism. And that's absolute nonsense. You want to know why? That simple little word called radical. By putting the word radical in there, it makes it clear, or extremist, it makes it clear that you're not talking about all Muslims, or even most Muslims, just the extremist Muslims, or just the radical Muslims. But they are still part of the Muslim community. Now, if you want to argue that they've perverted the religion and whatever, okay, that's fine. Personally, I don't think they've perverted the religion. I think they're actually Islamic purists. They're the ones who are following authentic Islam as Muhammad himself taught it. And I've given you the examples to back that up many times on this show. The majority, folks, the overwhelming majority of Muslims worldwide reject terrorism, and I think that that's good. But let's not kid ourselves, okay? They are misinterpreting Islam as a peaceful religion. The way Muhammad found Islam, it's not supposed to be a peaceful religion. That's not how it's supposed to be. Islam was spread by the sword ordered by Muhammad. So pure Islam, the way Muhammad taught it, is not peaceful. Thankfully, most Muslims worldwide don't know that. Or they at least are just in denial to that. Well, that's good. I'm glad they are. I'm glad they are. But the ISIS terrorists are not in denial of that. The ISIS terrorists are saying, let's practice Islam the very same way that Muhammad practiced Islam. So the president needs to acknowledge this reality within Islam. Nobody's saying that there's magic in the words radical Islam. But you got to know who you're fighting. You got to know who your enemy is. Imagine during World War II if FDR refused to use the word Nazi. No, we're not going to refer to Nazis and Nazism. No, I'm not going to use that. We're just going to refer to it as, whatever, German workplace violence or whatever kind of phrases you want to go. No, you need to acknowledge the reality of Nazism. And it wouldn't make sense for FDR to say, I'm not going to use the word Nazi, because that's like painting all German people worldwide with a broad brush and saying all Germans are Nazis. No, we're not. Nobody said all Germans and all people of German heritage were Nazis. Nobody said that. Nobody said that all people of Japanese descent were kamikazes. Nobody said that. So, but you have to acknowledge the people that you're fighting. You have to acknowledge what is at the core of their motivation. And President Obama has been unwilling to acknowledge that, and that's what the problem has been. And that's what some Republicans are pointing out back to him and firing back. But, there's another issue here that I find really troubling, okay? President Obama, he'll never say that terrorist acts are carried out in the name of Islam. He denies that. He insists that these bad acts have nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. Has nothing whatsoever to do with Islam, the religion of Islam. Nothing at all. So anytime somebody does something in the name of Islam, something bad, the president says, oh, that has nothing to do with Islam. Nothing whatsoever. He looks at Islam through the best possible lens, through rose-colored glasses. And if somebody does something in the name of Islam, well, it's not connected to Islam in any way. However, he doesn't look at Christianity through that same lens. He seems to look at Christianity through the worst possible lens. Because when he looks at stuff that's been done in the past, by people who claim to be Christians, Christians behaving badly, the president does not feel the need to say that has nothing whatsoever to do with Christianity. Think about like the Crusades. Even though, quite frankly, the Crusades, there's been rewritten history about that. The Crusades were actually a defensive war, a retaliatory war where Christians were reclaiming land taken by Muslims. But if you want to argue that some of the Christian warriors during the Crusades went too far in their attacks, that's fair, and we can have that debate. But let's say they did. Does President Obama feel the need to say the Crusades have absolutely nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever? Folks, there were slave owners in the South that were Christians. And in a twisted sense of perspective, they thought it was okay for Christians to own slaves. All right, now that's twisted. All right? But you're going to see the president say slavery, even though it was in the Bible Belt and in the South, slavery had nothing to do with Christianity. Nothing whatsoever to do. Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow had nothing whatsoever to do with Christianity. Do you see the president defending Christianity to say, this has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity? When somebody goes out there and shoots an abortion doctor, do you see the president going on TV going, this has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity, nothing to do with the pro-life cause? You don't see that, do you? Anytime you see any Christian or somebody purporting to be a Christian behaving badly, like that pastor in Kansas who would go out and say, God hates FAGS. Did you ever see the president go on TV and go, people like that have absolutely nothing to do with Christianity? See, he doesn't do that, does he? Actually, he does just the opposite. He brings up things like slavery. He brings up things like Jim Crow, and he connects them to Christianity. He brings up things like the Crusades and connects them to Christianity. You think I'm kidding? Listen to, here's just a couple of examples. Just a couple of examples of Barack Obama bringing up the worst things in history that were practiced by purported Christians. And notice the president is not saying, hey, this stuff has nothing to do with Christianity. He connects it gladly to Christianity.
Remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. Slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ. On Easter, I do reflect on the fact that as a Christian, I am supposed to love. And I have to say that sometimes when I listen to less than loving expressions by Christians, I get concerned.
He has no problem referring to those people as Christians. Why won't he refer to the terrorists as Muslims? Why doesn't he say, Muslims have committed terrible deeds in the name of Muhammad? He's got no problem saying Christians have committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. He's got no problem saying that. But he won't say Muslims have committed terrible deeds in the name of Muhammad. What is it about this president that he looks at Islam through rose-colored glasses, and at all costs he must protect Islam from any kind of negative perception, and the ugliness that exists within Islam, that has nothing to do with Islam. But with Christianity, let's not talk about the good things. Let's not talk about the wonderful things in Christianity. Let's just look at the ugliest, worst parts that have taken place within Christendom, and let's talk about those. And let's bring those up. Even though nobody else is bringing them up, let's bring them up, Mr. President, and you talk about it. Here would be an idea. Wouldn't it be nice if the president would actually go on TV and instead of talking about these things and trying to smear Christianity and talk about the worst in it, how about going on TV and saying, the Orlando shooting and this terrorist attack, it was in a gay bar. But Christian leader after Christian leader after Christian organization has been coming out and pouring love and support into the LGBT community and into Orlando. American Family Association, this Christian organization, they have been pouring love and prayers and everything else into the LGBT community. Franklin Graham and the entire Christian community has been doing this. Chick-fil-A opened up their stores on Sunday in Orlando so that they could prepare food to feed people that were at the blood banks that were donating blood to help save the lives of the LGBT community that was shot. And so this is what Christianity is all about. How about doing that, Mr. President? You profess to be a Christian. Is that asking too much? Or does it just have to be, anything bad that happens? That's not Islam. Has nothing to do with it. But in Christianity, hey, this is Christianity, and look what Christians do. Look what's been done in the name of Christ. I'm telling you, folks, it's a very, very troubling thing about this president. You're listening to The Bob Dutko Show.